Andrew Dalton from Johnson & Johnson is chair of ABHI's Orthopaedic Group. Andrew, thanks for joining us today. I always start with this question because people will be interested. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background and your experience, such it is relevant to your leadership of this group.
Yeah, no, hi Richard, and good to talk to you, and hello to everyone that might be watching this kind of virtually. Yeah, I'm the general manager of DePuy Synthes in the UK, so that's the orthopedic franchise for Johnson & Johnson Medical Devices. In terms of, and I've been the chair now for kind of 6 to 9 months of the OSIS group. I was vice chair before then for a number of years, working with Sandra Lawrence, who was the chair of the group at that time. And yeah, I've kind of got a varied background. I've been with J&J for kind of 19 years. I suppose what's really kind of relevant to this kind of group and chairing it, I've always worked in orthopedics for 19 years. So I know the orthopedic kind of landscape. I pretty much, my current job kind of looks after all pretty much categories of orthopedics that DePuy Synthes play in, which is pretty much most of them. But also I've worked kind of at worldwide and also kind of European level as kind of category leader for a lot of different parts of the business as well, such as the hip business, the trauma business, shoulder business, etc. So I'd like to think I've got a pretty good understanding of the orthopedic landscape, albeit you're learning every day, and there is always kind of new dynamics that kind of come into play. I've also within the organization worked not just in sales and marketing, but I've worked, like I say, in kind of regional groups and worldwide groups. And from there, you get a big exposure into things like regulatory approvals and things like clinical trials and stuff. And from that perspective, that's really relevant to the OSIS group because a lot of our work is around some of the market access challenges within orthopedics in the UK. And a lot of that can be kind of regulatory driven. And there's always more and more things coming through. I think the final thing that I'd also kind of add is I also, before J&J, worked in kind of clinical diagnostics and biotech pharma, but I worked in a really small group, a very much smaller company, as we call an SME. And we have a number of SMEs that are part of the OSIS group. And it literally was probably about 15 of us that worked in the UK business then. When I was kind of in a manager in that business, I'd be double hatting. 1 minute I'd be kind of literally running a sales team. Next minute I'd be leading a team, getting our ISO 9000 certificates and things. So I know what it's like not to work in a corporate. I know what it's like to be in a startup. I know what it's like to be in a smaller company. And I think that's important because, a lot of our members within different groups are from the smaller businesses. And, we need that. We need that innovation in the industry. And I know how hard it is where you're literally probably juggling 5 or 6 different things at the same time, all different topics, all different functions. So I've got an appreciation of it as well.
That's great. And the one thing I do, the great thing about our groups is we bring and feel so much experience and expertise in these areas. And your points there about support for small companies are very well made as well. I know your own organisation and others are very generous in nurturing and mentoring small companies through. So, Andrew, you mentioned different categories of orthopaedics. It's a high profile area. It's been a lot in the news recently, hasn't it? Because it's a high volume area, and we're worried about all those backlogs of operations. People have probably heard about knees and hips, but just give us a sense of the offer the industry has in the orthopaedic space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the orthopedics market overall in the UK, if you look at all specialities, and I'll kind of explain a bit which ones they are, and there's always different ways to categorize a market, but it's a market that's worth over $1 billion. So it's a big market just in the UK. And the most public, or the most well-known part of the industry, which the public will be aware of, is hip and knee replacements, as it sounds, right? Hip and knee replacement surgery. Hear it on the news. That's what people talk about in terms of backlog. And that's certainly the biggest part of the market. But also there are a lot of other big parts of the market. Another part of it, which is in elective orthopedics, is kind of what we call sports med, or the soft tissue kind of side of the business. So ACL reconstructions, soft tissue reconstructions of the shoulder, but also that goes into the hands, the wrists, the hip, foot and ankle as well, all within that kind of soft tissue space. So that's another big part of the market, and a growing part of the market overall. We also have then trauma, breaking bones, as it sounds, plates and screws, rods, external fixators for long bone fractures, pelvic fractures, things like that. And there's also then kind of another big part of it is then spine. that is kind of not in the core OSIS group. That's kind of in a separate spine special interest group, but is kind of what we term orthopaedics. And that is all kind of pathologies of spine, whether that's deformity, tumor, again, if you break your spine, and then also degenerative disease as well. And then there are then kind of smaller kind of specialities. There's shoulder reconstruction, which is a smaller part of it, like a hip and knee replacement, but in the shoulder. And then you get kind of what we call more extremities, where you can get things like wrist replacements, elbow replacements, finger kind of joint replacements and things like that. And also what we call foot and ankle procedures as well, which kind of normally categorized as part of trauma, but they are kind of elective procedures. So forefoot reconstruction and things. So it's a big variety. You also then sometimes, as part of that market, get into what we call the head and face. So the max fax part of the business as well. I think in the core OSIS group, a lot of our members are pretty much hip and knee companies with trauma as well, and sports med, soft tissue, shoulders. That's the kind of core part of it. And then we have a separate group that we do joint meetings with, did one actually earlier this week, with a spine special interest group. But that's a separate group that's run for kind of the organizations and also divisions within the bigger organizations that focus on spine.
That's great. That's fascinating, Andrew. Thank you. And as you say, it's a big specialty, and it all sounds very bionic and very exciting. So with so much to go at, and with so much going on, we've sort of alluded already to challenges around elective procedure numbers. What are the priorities for the group at the moment, and what are you going to be up to over the next few months?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we've had some priorities that have kind of been running through as a constant theme for as long as I've been part of the group. And certainly in hip and knee surgery, but then other parts of orthopedic surgery, data collection is a big topic, but then also different governance measures that are in place as well, and kind of the regulatory environment, but then things that also touch the regulatory environment. And I'll explain a bit further. So first of all, the group is very active in shaping the National Joint Registry. We have 2 seats as part of the governance team in the National Joint Registry, which are OSIS members and ABHI members. So we've actually got an absolute voice in the National Joint Registry, and the registries are proliferating. The spine registry is kind of in its relative infancy, but I think registries as part of the Cumberledge report are only going to proliferate. So there's a huge amount of learning from the National Joint Registry, but also we've definitely got ourselves a seat at the table to have a voice in shaping those registries for the future. I think the other topic as well is then beyond compliance. Beyond compliance is it's kind of like a regulatory body, but it's not part of the official regulatory framework for the UK, but it's really kind of looking at new innovation and giving governance around it from a clinical perspective for new innovation within hip and knee procedures, mainly in hip and knee kind of categories. And again, it's driven a lot off the data that the National Joint Registry produces, and then providing governance in the first early years of products as they kind of enter the market and establish themselves in the market. Again, we have 2 seats at the table there. We have 2 people that actually represent ABHI and OSIS within the Beyond Compliance governance team as well. So again, that's kind of always a big topic, what's going on in those spaces. And then kind of related is there's quite a few regulatory changes with the MHRA post-Brexit. And those are things that we stick very, very close to, having an industry voice and shaping that kind of future landscape as well. So that's kind of what I'd term all the kind of regulatory environment. We then also have things that might be kind of more what I'd call in the health economic world. We have various kind of nice activities and technology assessments that might happen at various points within a year. So we make sure we stick very close to that, making sure that we really kind of look into those, provide information on all the topics I've said, but then things like around nice to smaller companies that might not have the specialist resources, but want to know what's going on and have a voice, and a voice through the ABHI. Things like tariffs have come up before historically. We've kind of influenced all of those. I think then the other big category is kind of the access to orthopedic care. And before COVID, it was kind of barriers to orthopedic care, and those barriers kind of existed through various policies that might have been in place driven by CCGs. Now I think that's changed. I think we all know there's a big patient backlog of orthopedic patients, and it's how in the COVID recovery orthopedics patients can be prioritised. So we have an ongoing dialogue that we have with the British Orthopaedic Association, the key society, We meet with them 3 or 4 times a year, so we have a shared voice, get key insights from them. We've really established that kind of relationship and network. And then we also work with the BOA with 2 other groups, ARMA and also Versus Arthritis, which represent the patient bodies. And we've created a real kind of forum there to have a common interest, common messaging, and also making sure that we can understand the problems, get a unique insight to the problems, but also help shape how we can prioritize orthopedic care in the UK. And then with that, we also reach out to other key stakeholders. The most recent we had at one of our meetings was Andrew Bennett, who is the MSK lead, and again, providing unique insight with what's going on and also shaping that kind of agenda to make sure that we're representing industry in the right way, but representing industry to help the patient. I think those are the big thing, big agenda items.
Well, it's a big agenda, and they're all big items as well. And it's worth pointing out to people watching this, probably new to our groups, thinking, "Wow, this is a very, very well established, long-standing group," and so you've had a lot of time to get around it. And also, I think there's a lot of learning to be shared there. You mentioned post-Cumberledge and a world where registers will be ever more relevant to us, and I think there's some real learning across groups there. That just leaves me, Andrew, to thank you very much for all your energy and your leadership of this group and the time you dedicate to us. And we look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Richard. And thanks, everyone. And speak again soon.